I used to believe weddings were about families coming together, not just two people, but two worlds finally aligning in love and celebration. That belief carried me through every late night planning session, every fabric choice, every guest list revision. I told myself my parents would be there, front row, proud, emotional, finally seeing me as more than just the quiet daughter, who never demanded much. I was wrong. It started small at first, so small I convinced myself I was imagining it. When I sent them wedding updates, my mother would reply hours later with short, distracted messages. "We'll see. We're busy. Don't worry, we'll manage." My father barely responded at all, except when my sister called him about her grandchildren. Then his voice would instantly brighten, full of warmth I rarely heard directed at me. My sister lived only a few hours away. She had 2 children, and now those children had children of their own. Somehow, that new generation had become the center of my parents' universe. Every weekend was about them. Every school function, every small achievement, every minor illness turned into a family emergency that required full attention. And I was planning a wedding that apparently could wait. When I first got engaged, I had hoped it would bring us closer. I imagined my mother helping me pick jewelry, my father walking me through traditions like he had once done for my sister. I thought they would finally see that I was building my own life, my own happiness, but instead, I became background noise. One evening, I sat with my wedding planner going over venue details when I called my mother to confirm something important. She picked up after the 3rd ring. "Yes," she said, her tone rushed. "I need to confirm if you and Dad will attend the final venue walk through next week," I said carefully. There was a pause, then the faint sound of children shouting in the background. "Oh, that day," she replied. "Your sister's grandkids have their school event. We promised them already." I blinked, not fully understanding what I had just heard. "It's just a walkthrough," I said slowly. "It's important for the wedding preparation." "Yes, yes," she said dismissively. "We trust you, you can handle it. Don't make things complicated." Then she hung up. I stared at my phone for a long time after the call ended. The wedding planner was still talking, but her voice sounded distant, like it was coming from another room. I nodded anyway, pretending I was fine. That was the first time something inside me cracked, but I still made excuses for them. Maybe they were overwhelmed. Maybe they didn't understand how important these things were. Maybe I was overreacting. Then came the dress fitting. I had chosen a simple but elegant design, nothing extravagant, just something that felt like me. I sent them pictures weeks in advance, hoping for even a small reaction. My mother replied with a thumbs-up emoji. My father didn't reply at all. On the day of the fitting, I sat alone in the boutique mirror, watching the seamstress adjust the fabric, while other brides laughed with their families. One girl had her mother adjusting her veil with trembling hands. Another had her father awkwardly trying to fold a dupatta without messing it up. There was laughter, chaos, love everywhere. I smiled to hide the emptiness in my chest. My phone buzzed. A message from my mother. "We can't make it today. The kids have a small accident, nothing serious, but we need to take them to the clinic. No apology. No rescheduling, just absence." I stared at the message for a long time before placing my phone face down. The seamstress asked softly, "Is your family coming later?" I forced a smile. "They're busy," but busy started to feel like a permanent excuse for being unwanted. Still, I didn't confront them. I didn't argue. I didn't want to be that daughter, the one who complains, the one who makes things difficult. I kept telling myself that on the wedding day, everything would change, that somehow they would show up and make me feel like I mattered. The final rehearsal was scheduled for a week before the wedding. I reminded them 3 times. I even asked my father directly, He sighed heavily over the phone. We'll try. That try. Should have told me everything. On the day of the rehearsal, I stood at the venue entrance for 20 minutes, checking my phone over and over. Guests were arriving. The coordinator was asking questions, and my fiancé kept glancing at me with concern. Are your parents coming? He asked gently. I forced a smile, of course. But deep down, I already knew. They didn't come, no call, no message, no explanation. Just silence. That evening, I went home and sat alone in my room, still wearing the faint exhaustion of pretending everything was fine. My wedding dress sketch lay on my desk, carefully planned, beautifully imagined. It suddenly felt like it belonged to someone else's life. I thought about calling them. I even picked up my phone twice, but both times I put it down again. Because I was starting to understand something I didn't want to accept. It wasn't that they were too busy. It was that I wasn't their priority. And for the first time in my life, I stopped trying to convince myself otherwise. The week before a wedding is supposed to feel like warmth building in every corner of your life. Excitement, chaos, laughter, last-minute panic, all of it blending into something unforgettable. That's what I was told. That's what every bride dreams of. But for me, it felt like standing alone in the middle of a storm no one else could see. After the rehearsal show, I stopped expecting too much. I told myself I would not call them first anymore. If they wanted to be part of my life, they would show it without being begged for it. That was the new rule I made silently in my heart. Still, a small part of me, annoyingly persistent, kept hoping. Maybe they would surprise me. Maybe they would show up at the next event. Maybe they would finally choose me. That hope died on a Tuesday morning. I was sitting with my fiancé going over seating arrangements when my phone rang. My mother's name flashed on the screen. For a brief moment, I felt that familiar spark. Maybe this was it. Maybe she was calling to say they were coming. Maybe she finally realized. I picked up quickly. Yes, Mom. Her voice came rushed again, as if she was already halfway out of the conversation. Listen, we won't be able to attend your wedding rehearsal dinner or the preparation meetings this week. I froze. My fiancé glanced at me, sensing the shift in my expression. Why? I asked quietly. There was a pause. Then the sound of children laughing in the background. Your sister's grandkids have their annual school event, she said casually, as if she was talking about something trivial. It's important. They've been preparing for weeks. We already promised them we'll be there. I didn't respond immediately. My fingers tightened around the phone. And my wedding? I asked, my voice lower now. A sigh. That familiar sigh, like I was asking for too much again. Don't start this again, she said. It's just a few meetings. You have everything under control. You're a smart girl. A smart girl. Not a daughter they needed. Not a bride they prioritized. Just a capable girl who could handle things alone while they chose someone else's life over mine. I felt something inside me go still. Mom, I said slowly, this is my wedding week. I know, she replied, but there was no weight in her tone. We'll come on the day of the wedding. Don't make it dramatic. And then she ended the call. No goodbye. No softness, just an ending that felt too familiar. I sat there staring at my phone, my reflection faintly visible on the screen. My fiancé didn't speak at first. He just reached over and placed his hand over mine. They're not coming, are they? He asked gently. I didn't answer right away, because if I said it out loud, it would become real. But it was already real. I nodded once. The room felt smaller after that. Later that day, I tried to focus on last-minute arrangements. The florist needed confirmation. The caterer needed updates. The venue manager kept calling with questions I used to think my parents would help me handle. But now I was the only one making decisions for a wedding that was supposed to include them. Every call felt heavier. Every signature felt lonelier. By evening, I went home early. The sky outside was turning orange, soft and beautiful, completely unaware of the mess inside me. I sat by my window, holding my wedding invitation card. My parents' names were printed there neatly, as if they belonged to a story they were actively abandoning. I traced their names with my thumb, then I stopped, because something in me shifted, not loudly, not dramatically, just quietly like a door closing. The next morning, I received a message from my father. It was short. "We will try to come on time. Traffic might be difficult. Don't worry. Don't worry." As if worry was something I could simply switch off. As if I hadn't already spent months watching them choose someone else over me again and again. I stared at the message for a long time before locking my phone. My fiancé found me later sitting at the dining table, untouched breakfast in front of me. "Are you okay?" he asked. I gave a small nod. "I think I am learning something." "About them?" he asked. I shook my head. "About me." Because for the first time, I wasn't asking why I wasn't chosen. I was finally understanding what it meant that I wasn't. That evening, I went through the wedding checklist alone. I crossed off things one by one. Venue confirmed, dress ready, guests informed. Everything was in place, except them, and instead of crying like I used to, I just felt calm, not peaceful, not healed. Just calm in the way something feels right before it stops breaking and starts becoming something else. That was the moment I stopped waiting for them to choose me, because they already had, and it wasn't me. By the time the wedding week fully arrived, I had stopped checking my phone every few minutes. That habit, refreshing messages, rereading excuses, waiting for a miracle apology, had drained something out of me. Now I moved through the days like I was observing my own life from a distance, calm on the surface, rearranging everything underneath. People around me thought I was just overwhelmed, a bride under pressure. That was the easiest explanation. No one looked too closely at the silence behind my smile. My fiancé noticed, though. He didn't push. He didn't question every pause. He simply stayed close, like a steady presence that didn't demand explanations I wasn't ready to give. Sometimes that was the only thing keeping me grounded, but inside me, something had already shifted. Because once you see a pattern clearly enough times, it stops feeling like an accident. My parents weren't busy, they were choosing, and I was not on their list of priorities. On the third evening before the wedding, I sat alone in the living room after everyone had left. The house was unusually quiet. Boxes of wedding decorations were stacked neatly in one corner. Guest lists lay spread on the table. Everything looked organized, controlled, perfect on the outside. Inside me, nothing felt perfect. My phone lit up with another message from my mother. "We are still trying to adjust plans. Your sister's grandkids have an emergency rehearsal for their event. We might be a little late, but don't worry. Everything will be fine." I read it once. Then again, something in me didn't flare up this time. There was no anger, no panic, no pleading, just clarity. Because I finally understood the pattern completely. Every important moment in my life had always been adjustable. Every milestone, my achievements, my struggles, my happiness had always been flexible enough to move aside for someone else's needs. I placed the phone face down, and for the first time I didn't respond. Instead, I stood up and walked to my desk where a small leather folder sat. Inside it were documents I had quietly organized over the past weeks, things no one had paid attention to, things no one thought I was capable of understanding or handling. The keys that everyone underestimated. Not just literal keys, but control, access, responsibility. Decisions that had always been casually passed around in my family, without ever considering me part of them. My father had once laughed when I asked questions about it. "You don't need to worry about that," he had said. "It's complicated. Focus on your wedding." Focus on my wedding. The irony wasn't lost on me anymore. Because, while I was supposed to focus on flowers and dresses, I had quietly been learning everything they assumed I would never care about. Business accounts, property arrangements, responsibilities that had always been too heavy for me until suddenly they weren't. I wasn't acting out of revenge, not yet. I was acting out of understanding, and understanding changes everything. That night I made a decision, not loudly, not dramatically, not with confrontation or tears, quietly. I would stop asking for a place in their attention, and I would start taking control of the parts of my life they assumed I would never touch. The next morning, I met with our family lawyer under the excuse of final wedding paperwork. My parents didn't even ask questions. They trusted the narrative they had built around me, the obedient daughter who stayed in her lane. The lawyer spoke carefully, explaining things I already understood more than they realized. Ownership details, authority clauses, access permissions. Every word felt like a door unlocking. When I signed the final document, my hand didn't shake. Not because I was confident, but because I was done waiting. Afterward, I stepped outside into the bright sun, holding a copy of everything I had just finalized. The world outside felt normal, cars passing, people laughing, life continuing as if nothing important had just shifted. But something had. My fiancé called me as I was walking back. "Where are you?" he asked, taking care of something. I replied. There was a pause. "Is it about them?" I stopped for a moment, watching a group of people crossing the street, laughing together like families do when nothing is broken inside them. "Yes," I said quietly, but I didn't explain, because some decisions don't need approval anymore. That evening, I didn't argue with my parents. I didn't remind them of what they were missing. I didn't ask them to choose me again. I simply stopped making space for people who only showed up when it was convenient. And for the first time in my life, I understood something powerful. Love without priority is just an illusion you keep forgiving. And I was done forgiving what kept repeating itself. The morning of my wedding arrived with an almost cruel kind of beauty. The sky was clear, soft sunlight spilling across the venue like nothing in the world was wrong. Guests began arriving early, laughter mixing with music, photographers moving around capturing moments that would later look perfect in photos. But perfection is a strange thing, because what looks complete on the outside can still be hollow at the center. I stood in front of the mirror in my bridal room, dressed in my wedding attire, hands steady as the stylist adjusted the final details. For the first time in days, I wasn't thinking about who was coming. I was thinking about who already hadn't. My parents were late, not unexpectedly late, not traffic late, just absent in a way that had become familiar enough to stop hurting in sharp waves. It was more like a dull truth sitting beside me now, no longer shocking, just confirmed. My fiancé entered quietly, meeting my eyes in the mirror. "Any sign of them?" he asked gently. I shook my head. He didn't push further. He just nodded once, like he understood more than I was saying. Outside, the ceremony was about to begin, and then, just as the coordinator announced final seating arrangements, a message came through. "From my father, we are on the way, don't start without us." I stared at the screen for a long moment. Don't start without us, as if everything had been waiting for them. as if I had been waiting for them. I placed the phone down without replying, because I had already stopped building my day around their arrival. The ceremony began on time, music played, guests stood, the aisle was ready. Everything moved forward without hesitation, as life tends to do when you stop asking it to pause for people who never arrive on time. And I walked, not waiting, not looking back, just forward. The moment I reached the front, I saw faces filled with emotion, smiles, tears, joy. My fiancé's eyes softened when he looked at me, like I was the only thing in the world that mattered in that moment. And for a while, I let myself believe that. The vows were halfway through when a ripple of movement passed through the guests. I didn't turn immediately. I already knew what it meant before I saw it. They had arrived. My parents stood at the entrance of the venue, slightly disheveled, breath uneven, as if they had rushed through traffic to reach a moment they assumed would still be waiting for them. My mother's eyes scanned the room quickly, searching for attention. My father straightened his posture, as if presence alone could erase absence. But the ceremony didn't stop. No one asked them to sit in the front. No one paused the vows. They were shown seats not at the center but at the side. Close enough to see, far enough to understand. My mother looked confused. My father frowned slightly, as if this arrangement didn't match the version of reality he had expected. And then their eyes met mine. I didn't smile. I didn't wave. I simply continued, because something important had already been decided long before this moment. The wedding finished without disruption. Applause filled the space. People stood, cheering, celebrating, crying. It was everything a wedding should be, and still, something had changed forever beneath it. Later, during the reception, my parents finally approached me. My mother reached out first. "You started without us," she said quickly, her voice carrying disbelief more than anger. I looked at her calmly. "Yes," I replied. My father stepped forward. "We told you we were coming." I nodded once. "You also told me you were coming to the rehearsal, and the meetings and everything else." Silence fell between us. For the first time, there were no excuses left to offer. My mother's voice softened. "We didn't think it would matter this much." That sentence, "We didn't think it would matter." Something inside me finally settled, not in anger, not in sadness, but in understanding. Because that was the truth they had always lived by. My life only mattered when it fit into theirs. I reached into my bag and placed something in my father's hand. Keys. He looked down at them, confused. "What is this?" I met his eyes. "It's everything I was never supposed to understand," I said quietly. "But I did." His expression shifted slightly. "You don't know what you're doing." I almost smiled then. Not bitterly, not proudly, just finally free of confusion. "I know exactly what I'm doing," I replied. Around us, conversations continued. Music played softly. Life moved on, unaware that something far more permanent than a ceremony had just taken place. My father tightened his grip on the keys. "You're making a mistake out of emotion." I shook my head. "No," I said. "I made a decision out of clarity." My mother looked between us, her voice smaller now. "We are your parents." I paused. "Yes," I said, "and I was your daughter." A long silence followed. Not dramatic, just final. They didn't argue after that. Not really. Because there are moments when arguments stop working, when years of patterns collapse under the weight of being finally seen clearly. They stepped back, and I turned away, back to my husband, back to my life, back to a future that no longer required permission from people who only showed up when it was convenient. And as I walked away, I understood something simple but irreversible. Revenge was never about destruction. It was about stopping the cycle. And this time I chose myself.